So one of the most controversial stocks in the market right now is of course Nikola Motors, who's trying to jump into the very high growth electric vehicle market, but not just with battery EVs, but also with hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, or maybe even using a combination of both technologies. But because they're such a young kind of startup company, as you would expect, you've got your bulls rushing into the stock, calling it the next Tesla, and then you've got your bears calling it a scam, maybe short selling it, and claiming that the stock is likely headed to zero. And of course, that's led to it being extremely volatile. And then you've got something different in General Motors, who used to be a very reliable and once one of the largest and most successful automakers with a proven track record in the past, but has since seen their business and also of course their stock price kind of deteriorate in recent years as they struggle to adapt to a changing market that is definitely becoming more electrified and will continue to do so in the future, and very likely eat away at their traditional ICE vehicle sales. So as you would expect, both stocks have been very volatile and very kind of polarizing and controversial, but for different reasons. Well, it just so happens that they recently decided to partner up, which sent both stocks really skyrocketing, but then their stocks kind of came crashing back down as new controversies and accusations of fraud started to pop up. So as a result, a lot of you have been asking me to share my opinion on everything that's going on and to let you know if I consider either one of these two stocks to be good long-term investments. Well, that's what we're going to do in today's video. We got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and start by just kind of taking a quick look at their stock prices, and let's get a little bit of context on what's been going on so far, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so taking a look at the stock, starting with Nikola, just to give you an idea of how crazy volatile this stock is, on Thursday it dropped by 8%, on Friday it dropped 2%, Monday was Labor Day, but then on Tuesday it skyrocketed by over 40%, then dropped by over 15% on Wednesday, dropped another 11% on Thursday, and then plummeted another 16% on Friday. Pretty crazy. And we'll talk about this week's volatility and why it's happening in just a second. But when zooming out a little, you can see that their lowest share price was $10 a share, but that was actually a different company that sort of merged with Nikola. So this stock, NKLA, ticker symbol NKLA, really went public at around $30 a share, which leaves them basically flat today. Although at one point they had climbed to over $90 a share, which was a gigantic run up, but of course they proceeded to crash by over 66% from there. But speaking about the recent volatility this past week, the reason it initially shot up by over 40% was because of a new partnership announced with General Motors. Now, in case you don't know a lot about Nikola, they've been trying to launch these hydrogen fuel cell trucks, mostly really big semi trucks that, to be fair, are at least promising to deliver much better performance than EVs and diesel with their new hydrogen fuel cell technology. So things like the same horsepower and torque as EVs, but better range, less weight, and extremely faster charging, and that could be a big deal. However, one of the biggest concerns over hydrogen technology is that it's notoriously inefficient, at over 50 percentage points less efficient than batteries, which could turn into a major problem for them in the future. Not to mention that they have virtually zero infrastructure, with the only states I could find offering hydrogen refueling being California and Connecticut. Not to mention that their new Badger pickup truck, which I admit is not only super cool looking aesthetically, but will also offer theoretically better performance than virtually any EV truck in development, including the Cybertruck, thanks to its hybrid model of using both hydrogen and an electric battery that allows it to offer as much as 800 miles of range, with 300 from hydrogen and 300 from battery. And really, by using that hybrid model, you can theoretically get the benefits of both without many of the drawbacks, because they can kind of, each one of them can kind of make up for whatever the other one lacks. Still, because Nikola hasn't really built anything yet, we were constantly wondering where the Nikola Badger would be manufactured, and that's where General Motors comes into play, as a new partnership was recently announced that sent both stocks flying. Now, because General Motors is a much more stable company, so too is its stock that only shot up by about 8% on that Thursday, but also fell back down much less than Nikola on the preceding days, still leaving it slightly in the red though for the week, which also leaves them down over 18% year to date and still negative over the past 5 years, which is obviously not something shareholders would be happy about. Anyway, a big reason for both Nikola and GM's sudden drop after that huge rally this past week is because a new report just came out from Hindenburg Research that not only accuses Nikola of fraud, but also claims that the partnership deal with GM is essentially a joke, as Nikola brings very little value to the partnership. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss there, but I hope I was able to kind of bring you up to speed a little bit, give you a little bit of context. But now let's go ahead and dive deeper into the new partnership deal. We'll take a closer look at the report accusing them of fraud, and then of course I'll give my overall thoughts on whether I think either one of these two stocks is a buy. But let's go ahead and jump straight into that. Okay, so here's just a quick rundown of what the partnership includes. So basically, Nikola created $2 billion worth of stock that they're giving to General Motors, which equates to about 11% ownership of Nikola. So a very large amount there. And in return, GM will build Nikola's Badger pickup truck, which obviously Nikola desperately needed a reputable automaker to make their truck because they really have zero experience doing it themselves. But on top of that, GM will also provide Nikola with the electric batteries and hydrogen fuel cell systems that they need for their vehicles, including their large semi-trucks. And not just that, but Nikola doesn't even have their own autonomous driving technology like Tesla does. So to better compete with them, GM will also be providing them with their own autonomous driving systems. Now, I've said provide a bunch of times, but obviously by saying provide, I'm referring to GM selling all these things to Nikola, which the press release mentions could add up to around $4 billion in revenues and benefits for GM. On the other hand, Nikola claims that they will also be benefiting from around $4 billion in cost synergies, but to my knowledge, they haven't really given the exact specifics on how they plan to achieve that. In my opinion, though, this doesn't exactly seem like an amazing partnership. It's basically just Nikola paying billions of dollars to GM just for the opportunity of being able to buy their parts and manufacturing from them, which I guess they desperately needed, but it still seems like the deal really benefits GM a lot more than it does Nikola, as GM doesn't really seem to be taking any risk. If Nikola was to ever go under, it's not like GM bought any of the stock from them, but rather it was just kind of handed to them from Nikola so that GM could sell them even more stuff. Again, to me, it just doesn't really seem like GM is taking that much risk, if any at all. On the other hand, Nikola really diluted the heck out of their shareholders, and now they're not even really building their own vehicles, so they'll have to buy their vehicles from General Motors at a higher price tag, which means that they'll have to resell them when they sell them out in the market to customers at an even higher price because they need to figure out a way to turn a profit. So I think that's going to result in high price tags, high prices for Nikola's vehicles. And if there's one thing that you really want to avoid as a new startup company that is very young, without a lot of brand recognition, not a lot of customer loyalty, the thing you don't want to do is have very high price tags compared to your competition, because it's just going to make it that much harder to compete with all of them. Having said that, there's still this short seller report that is accusing Nikola of fraud, which is a big accusation. So let's just cover that really quick and then I'll give my final thoughts. So after the GM deal, a notable short seller called Hindenburg Research accused Nikola's founder, Trevor Milton, of nepotism and claimed that they have evidence to prove that Milton has been lying about the company in order to secure partnerships with larger automakers like General Motors. They claim Milton appointed his brother to a lead position despite not really being qualified for it, and lied about having more proprietary technology than they really had. And they also called out the GM partnership in specific, noting that Nikola is only really providing conceptual designs and a brand name without much else. In response, Nikola said that they've been vetted by some of the world's most credible companies and investors, and that they will not waver based on a report filled with misleading information attempting to manipulate the stock, since, of course, Hindenburg is in fact a large short seller of it. GM also responded by saying that they stand behind the partnership with Nikola and are fully confident in the value it will create for both companies. On top of that, Trevor Milton took to Twitter to respond to the reports, and it would really take too long to read to you guys everything that he posted, so I'm just going to show you some screenshots here, and if you want, you can pause the video and read them. But just kind of the gist of it is that he's obviously very upset with the report, which is understandable, and he claims that it's manipulation of the stock. So he actually involved the SEC to investigate the situation, and he said that he's working on rebuttals to every accusation made in the reports, and also went ahead and posted pictures of what I'm guessing is kind of like their evidence of their intellectual property that the report was arguing that they don't really have. So, for example, here's a couple pictures of their semi trucks being worked on in Germany. This one is kind of from behind, and then there's this other one here of the front, and you can see like the front cab leaning forward there. Okay, so with all of that said, is either one of these two stocks a buy? Well, when looking at Nikola, I'm really just not, obviously, I'm not a big fan of all the controversies going on with Nikola right now. And even if they kind of get through it, which my gut tells me that they probably will get through these issues, even if you remove the controversies from the whole kind of Nikola picture, you still end up with a very highly speculative, very young company that hasn't really proven anything yet. And so if I really wanted to go with an EV spec stock, I'd probably prefer something like NIO that has already proven that they can sell very high performance EVs. They operate in the world's largest market in China, the largest EV market. So they have tons of potential for growth there, and then they can later expand internationally as well if they have success, and they even have a better valuation too. For example, this year Nikola is expected to do 140,000 in sales, while NIO is expected to do almost 2.2 billion. If we convert that into price to sales ratios based on today's stock prices, NIO is really trading at around 10 times sales, while Nikola is over 100,000. Now, granted, Nikola is still not really selling anything, but even if we had revenues from 2021, NIO's PS ratio would drop to around 6, while Nikola would still be well over 150, and that's with them doing over $93 million in sales, which who knows if they'll even ever get close to that. So for me, it's just too much of a gamble to go with Nikola stock. You could definitely make a lot of money if they are successful, but at the same time, you're also taking on a lot of risk there too. And I just think there's safer bets out there in the market that still also have a lot of reward potential. And so I'd really just kind of rather wait and see if Nikola can really get up off the ground. They're still very young, very unproven. I'd like to see them kind of prove their business model and really get a better idea of where they're headed in the future before I'm willing to invest in them heavily. And that's really exactly what I did with Tesla. I waited to see if Tesla could prove their business model and make their way up towards profitability and get some momentum behind their sales growth. And once I saw those things, then I invested very heavily into Tesla, and I was still able to make like 1,000% profit. So it still worked out great, even though I waited a little bit until I felt more confident. So with something like Nikola, I'll be staying on the sidelines. I'd rather just kind of wait and see and make sure that they can actually prove their business model before I invest heavily into the stock. But GM, on the other hand, is kind of like the complete opposite story, because GM was actually very proven. They proved themselves very much so in the past, but now in recent years, now they're kind of struggling and their business is on the decline, and their future growth potential is what's kind of questionable because their business has been declining. Just looking back to 2016, sales have been plummeting for years. We're talking a 13% drop in 2017, 1% climb in 2018, then another 7% drop in 2019, and a horrible 14% drop on top of all of that this year. Next year should be a small rebound, but it would still leave them over $30 billion lower than what they saw 5 years ago. That's pretty bad. For reference, something like Tesla is not only not dropping this year, but they're actually soaring by 21% and then still surging by another almost 40% next year too. That's a huge difference. And that's why Tesla stock has really soared while GM has performed so badly over the years. Here's a 10-year chart of GM, and believe it or not, they're actually still down over that entire decade. Now, granted, they have paid a dividend throughout much of that, but this year GM was forced to eliminate it in order to preserve cash and try to survive this deep recession. That isn't to say, though, that GM can't turn things around. Obviously, the future of the automotive industry is probably electric, and GM seems to finally be taking that seriously. Not only have they developed their own battery technology, but they're also going to be using it in their new EV platform that is easily adaptable across a wide variety of new EVs that are coming out over the next few years. In fact, over the next 5 years, GM plans to spend more than half of their capital and engineering budgets on electrifying their vehicles and on autonomous driving technology, with over 40% of all new launches in China being either fully electric or at least hybrid. And when you consider that future potential coupled with a cheap valuation that is around 40 to 50% cheaper than the sector on a forward PE and PEG basis, GM does actually start to look like an interesting bet. So maybe both GM and Nikola can be kind of looked at as speculative stocks because they both really need to execute here in these next few years in order to just kind of survive and ensure future growth. So from that standpoint, I would probably say that Nikola is the higher risk, higher reward spec stock, while GM is way less risk and also probably much less reward potential, but still pretty decent potential overall. So given how kind of dicey the market and of course the economy is right now, I would prefer to go with the much safer choice. Nikola seems way too speculative for me, way too risky. I would rather go with GM if I had to choose between those two. But then even when looking just at GM, I'd rather go with something like Tesla because I feel like GM is still kind of playing catch up to Tesla. I think Tesla has the better brand awareness, the better momentum, the better technology, the better infrastructure. And so I just think Tesla will be the leader in the electric vehicle and the autonomous driving markets. But I think GM does have a lot of potential. I just think they need to execute and they need to take this stuff seriously. One concern is them cannibalizing their own ICE vehicle sales. But if they can figure out a way to get past all of that and get into these higher growth markets, GM does definitely have a lot of potential and they've done it in the past. Maybe they can do it here in the future as well. So GM is very intriguing to me, but I just prefer holding Tesla, and I don't feel like I need to own GM because Tesla already gives me a lot of exposure to these different markets. So I don't feel like I need to own GM, but I'll keep GM up on my watch list. And hey, maybe in the future I might actually end up owning GM. It does seem very interesting to me. But at the moment, I'm just going to keep waiting off on that one. So anyway, those are just my opinions. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say and what you guys think about all these different stocks down below. Leave your thoughts down there and I'll try to respond to as many as I can. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, please consider hitting the like button. Really helps the channel. But thanks again, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.